Pastor Jeff here with some thoughts of grace. There are paths all around for us to take. If you go for a walk in your neighborhood, you might encounter a sidewalk for you to walk on. I have seen more people walking on the sidewalk these last 2 months than I have seen in a lifetime. If you drive, there are roads for you to take. In fact, someone decided that it was beneficial to connect the cities of Buffalo and Rochester and Syracuse and Utica and Albany with a path called the New York State Thruway. Now, what would it look like for us to not take the New York State Thruway and going from Buffalo to Albany? What would it look like to not take any roads? It would be silly for us to look at these established roads that have been created for us to travel from one place to another and say, I don't trust these paths. Instead, I'm going to get there by traveling through that guy's farmland or going through that swamp over there. Or instead of utilizing the bridge that has been created to go over the ravine, I'm just going to try to cross that on my own. It would be strange because we would be putting our own health at risk and we would be taking more time than is necessary. So instead of trusting in the people that created these roads for us so that we can get there safely and efficiently, it would be detrimental for us to decide to go on our own. I encountered this last week when I was walking on the trails, and I realized that a lot of trails, they don't go straight up a hill or a mountain, or they don't go straight down a hill or a mountain. A lot of times they wind their way around, they wind their way down, or they wind their way up. And I noticed that while I was on the path, when I was on the trail last week, the trail was starting to wind down this hill. And I went and looked straight down the hill off the path, and I noticed where the trail will eventually end up, over by a bridge that crosses a creek. And I looked down there, and it looked nice down there. It looked like it had a great view of the creek and a great view of a valley, and it was nice and flat, and I wanted to enjoy that right away. That's where I wanted to be. But I noticed that if I took the path that wound its way down the hill, it would take me a few minutes. But instead, if I went straight down the hill, straight to where I wanted to go, then it would take me less than 30 seconds. If I'm honest, there was a moment of laziness that hit me. I knew I had to walk farther. I knew it was going to take me longer. And so if I went this shortest distance, a straight line down, I would get there faster. I wouldn't have to walk as far. I think the trail makers make you go on a route that winds its way down a hill because they realize it's going to be too much for people. If it would be too aggressive, it would be too intense, it wouldn't be safe. Sure, if I had taken that path, if I had decided to go straight down that hill, sure, I would have gotten to where I wanted to go in under 30 seconds. The question would be, what shape would I be in if I actually did that? It would be better for me if I trusted the one who made the trail instead of my own heart full of pride, impatience, and laziness. I think the same could be applied to our walk with Jesus Christ. He knows when something's going to be too much for us. He knows when something is not going to be healthy for us. So he might take us on a path that will seem longer at the time. It might seem unpleasant. But because he knows us and he knows the path ahead, he will take us on that path because, one, it will be the most beneficial for time, but it will also be the most beneficial for our health. The question is, will we trust in God's direction or will we trust our own? Let's take a look at Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3, starting at verse 5, going through to verse 8. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight. Do not be wise in your own eyes, But fear the Lord and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your body and refreshment to your bones. When you walk with Jesus, you have to come to terms with your own deficiency. With all of the silliness that has been going on these last few months, I have found that I don't have a clue what's going on. There are multiple press conferences every single day, and they don't help. We have one medical organization that will contradict the other medical organization. And better yet, they'll even contradict themselves. And so we have all of this confusion and all of this chaos. And if you're like me, you just want to make sense of it. And I have found that I am far more comfortable with my own reasoning and with my own estimation of things than I am with other people's. I think I'm right. And so instead of me listening to other people, I try to project what I think is right and say, this is the way we should do things. You know what that is? That's called pride. I try to convince myself and I try to convince other people that it's common sense, but if I'm honest, it's really pride. Can you relate to that at all? I do this in my own spiritual life as well. I don't like the feeling of not knowing where I'm going. I don't like to be uncomfortable. But part of me not placing trust in my own understanding is trusting in the Lord. Why? Because I have a track record. I have a track record that proves that I don't know everything. And when I think I do, and I deviate from the path that God has laid before me, I will and have in the past fallen down that mountain. I have to trust in the Lord. But recognizing my own deficiencies isn't the only reason to trust in the Lord. You see, it also is about acknowledging God's sufficiency. He knows what He's doing. I have to acknowledge that He is Lord. He is all-powerful. He is all-knowing. He makes our paths straight. That doesn't mean that we will not have unexpected turns. That doesn't mean that there isn't going to be moments of unpleasantness if we walk with Jesus Christ. What that means is that He will direct us to Himself, which is exactly where we need to be. That's what it means when it says that He will make our paths straight. The Bible teaches that He will guide our footsteps. It says that He will give us a firm foundation to stand. I appreciate what verse 6 says in Proverbs 3. It says to acknowledge God in all of our ways. What good is it for us to recognize our deficiency in one breath? What good is it to acknowledge God's sufficiency in one breath and then turn around and contradict that by saying, I'm going to take things into my own hands? What good is it? How can we say that we are truly a follower of Jesus Christ if we refuse to walk down the path that God has laid before us and decide that we're going to do things on our own? We can't say that we're a follower of Jesus and not walk down the path fully. Now, I've walked down many trails. Well, you can't walk down a trail halfway. You might be able to get away with it for a while, but eventually there's going to be a body of water. Eventually there's going to be a cliff that will either make it impossible for you to walk down the path halfway, or it's going to be seriously detrimental to your health. But how do I know I have deviated from the path? How do I know that I have veered off course? Sometimes it's not as easy as a cliff being off to the left or a body of water being off to the right. Sometimes when I'm walking on a trail, it seems like the path goes off one direction. But I realize later on that I'm off the path because I don't see the trail markers that lets me know this is the path to be on. So what that looks like for me in my walk with Jesus Christ is that I'm not seeing the trail markers that say, is God getting the glory in this situation, or am I? Is God's viewpoint being exalted, or is it my own? Am I prioritizing winning an argument or getting my way? And so that doesn't mean that we don't win arguments. That doesn't mean that we never get our way. What it means is that if that is our ambition, if that is our motivation, is to win an argument or to get our way, then perhaps we have strayed from the path. Another way for us to recognize trail markers that say you are on God's path is the fruit of the Spirit in your life. Now, this has been something that I've noticed that, especially when in these last couple of months, I have been challenged in taking a look at the fruit of the Spirit in my own life. Is my words and my deeds expressing kindness? Are they expressing love? What does patience look like in this situation? If you're like me, patience has been strained. I don't have the patience or the tolerance for other people in the way that I used to. Maybe that's because I am trying to blaze ahead with a trail that is more comfortable for me than the one that I'm on. What does it look like for us to be gentle? What does it look like for us to be in self-control? I don't know about you, but I get a little bit irritated when somebody says that they have lost weight during this time. I've actually heard that from a few people. They've lost weight. I don't understand it, because even though I've walked on trails all throughout this process, I still go back to my home and I still find a refrigerator full of food and I find a cupboard full of snacks, and I have no problem shoving all of those things in my mouth. And so I find that I'm not being self-controlled in my dieting, and that self-control extends beyond that in your words and your deeds. Are we people of self-control? What does it look like to have joy in our life in all of this, instead of having a life that is full of despair or a life that is grumpy because we can't do all the things that we want to do? Am I being faithful to God? Am I being faithful to His Word? Am I embodying peace, or I'm starting to be contentious, or I'm starting to be anxious? If I cannot be classified by the fruit of the Spirit in these last couple of months, then I have drifted from the path that God has laid before me. His path considers more than our petty agendas. It considers more than our desires. It considers more than our preferences. The only things that they consider is it considers His glory and our good. And if we find that we are violating either of these things, then we've probably deviated from God's path. In all of this means that humility should be our default. I like the wording in verse 7. Being wise in your own eyes. It's like Solomon was saying here, you might think you're wise, but everyone else who can see you for how you really are. Sometimes it's really easy to fool ourselves into thinking that we're better than we're not. I find that in my own life, if I'm revering Jesus, if I truly care about aligning up my life with His, then humility easily follows. And notice that the fruit of the Spirit is still joy, so humility doesn't mean constantly beating yourself down and being in a place of sorrow. It simply means that we are acknowledging our position in relation to the one who is directing our paths. And that brings us to our final point. God restores us. If you're like me, there is going to be something that will bump you off the path. But we have the promise of God's Word that says that if you return to Him, if you come back to Him, then not only will He embrace you, but He will restore you. He will refresh you. He will give you the power to continue on the journey that He has called you to. And we see that in verse 8. He restores us and He refreshes us. It is exhausting being right all the time. It is exhausting to think that I know everything all the time. It is exhausting to go to war over petty opinions. It is unhealthy for me to not trust in Jesus when He directs me to go someplace that I don't want to go. For me, I have to constantly remind myself to return to Jesus because He refreshes my soul. Some of you are finding these last couple of months to be unsettling because it has knocked you into unfamiliar territory. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to go on. You don't have the familiar support structure in place that you have become accustomed to. Would you trust Him to take you to where you need to be? Some of you are unsettled because this is just yet another thing where you have no idea what is going on with your life and what God is trying to do. Will you humble yourself today and trust Him by boldly walking in the path that God has laid before you, despite how unsettling it is, because the alternative is quite unhealthy. Some of you have had the time of your life these last few months. You get to work from home. You don't get to interact with people face to face, which can be awkward and weird and sometimes infuriating. This has been an introvert's wonderland. But all of this is likely going to end. Will you trust in Jesus and walk the path that He's laid before you when all of this changes? When we're walking down God's path for us, that means we're walking with Jesus Christ. And we have to remind ourselves that if we are walking with Jesus Christ, that means God is with us and God is for us. He has not been taken surprised by all of this. We just have to let Him be the one who leads us and guides us so that He can take us exactly where we need to be so that He gets the glory and that we have everything work out for our good. In doing this, the weight that is on our shoulders is lifted and we can be refreshed and we can continue on the journey that God has laid before us. So let's do that today. Thank you for joining me. See you this Sunday on our Facebook page and on our website as Pastor Doug brings the word about putting on the full armor of God. See you then. God bless.